Now, having touched on a wide range of issues in a short time, that was entirely to do with encouragement rather than admonishment in any way, I'll bring you back to where we left it before the quiz, and then we'll go and talk about the quiz a little bit. If you can recollect any of the God world maps that Ashana was showing you earlier, just imagine that you have a plumbing system that contains at least 1,728 cells. As a 12-strand DNA-coded angelic human, it's quite conceivable that you could have codes 2 to 4 times that many. But we'll just stay with what is common to all, 1,728. And the nesting of the Cathara grids is what your family, your soul family, looks like. You wouldn't think the Source would create a structure if it weren't common to all beings. And your structure is just like it. Now what we've just done in completing this questionnaire is that we've had a look at the relationships between all of these nesting Cathara grids that represent your immediate soul family, as if they were a plumbing system or a series of interconnected optical fibers. And that entire system is, to some degree, and we don't know yet by what degree, is limited in its efficiency, right, of drawing and utilizing primal life force currents, or the essence of Source, as sheer raw potential, in which you can accomplish many things. And the place I brought it to earlier, the place we brought it to earlier, was to a point where, on a 3D level, you have every reason to want to shift your relationship with your hologram and what it contains. Because, the process of moving into other worlds is entirely the same one. Now, what we want to do is to see what parts of your plumbing system are not supporting that ideal as you see and experience it now. And so what we're going to look at is something that will function on every level of being as you know it from a soul family standpoint, both here in 3D and on other levels simultaneously, because everything is occurring at the same time. So whatever you do in this context, here and now, in relation to this, will affect everything else, except we'll be able to identify the specific areas of the you that is an interlaced set of Cathara grids. Identify the areas where the lack of support is coming from. Now, the quiz isn't about A-star, high score stuff. At the level that we're working, it's a case of looking for balance, and that will be expressed in a number of ways. It will be expressed in terms of how we would experience something as a personality trait, psychological, emotional, mental, behavioral norm, the kind of knee-jerk kind of reaction that many of us have. I mean, even on a phobic level, have an irrational knee-jerk reaction to spiders or to types of people or certain kinds of circumstances. They express through the field energetically. They come through the party and they'll come out as a template which you know or think of as you, which determines your response energetically to any given set of circumstances, all of which complete your hologram. Now, this is going to help us to look into what's going on from a 3D perspective all the way through to the highest level of your soul group expression, your avatar level. And we'll be able to see which of the levels have weaknesses in terms of their ability to draw and process primal life force currents so that the entire integrated system functions more efficiently, and that therefore, through understanding what it needs to do to complement all the techniques and the attitudinal work, how it improves its efficiency, right? So that you then start to assume the power to shift your hologram and find, if you have to find ways of resolving the things I was referring to about a lack of support at the 3D level from some of the elements of your hologram, you would find it much easier, and you'd be have more capacity to absorb, understand, to resolve in a loving way the issues that other people are having about you coming into your own sense of self. Okay? So this is the means by which we add additional constructiveness to our attitudinal work and our techniques, and this forms a bridge between the two. Now, the first level we look at, and this area is not one that I'm inclined to spend any amount of time on in detail, certainly not in public anyway, because what we've just done is every one of you has actually exposed parts of yourself. And I can't possibly generalize and yet at the same time embrace your personal relationships with whatever you're finding. I can't, in other words, comment in general about specific cases, you know. And because that's tricky and a bit dangerous too, I don't intend to develop the 3D level of the insights, because where we want to go is to the cosmic view of what's really happening and bring it back to the balance between the primal life force currents themselves, where they are, and what you do to actually apply the correction to it. But the structure nevertheless is important. So now each of these represents a dimension of living reality from 1 to 12. Each of these represents the structure of creation, in as much as the Manu creates and experiences itself as a result of the expression of Ire, the magnetic frequency, which in turn produces Mane, which is the electrical, which in turn produces a product, which is Manu once more. And that process occurs over and over again, all the way through the harmonic universes. Now, the balances that we're looking for in here, individually, how they relate to each other, have a product, which we give other names to. So at density 1 level, there are certain kinds of observations, all of these that pertain to scores below 20 or lower. You take what I'm pointing at as significant. 20 or higher is insignificant from the standpoint of shadow and shadow dancer analysis. What this is about is to identify where you're being messed with, how much, and in what areas. Okay, there is an upside to all of this, which doesn't beg any questions really, because you're on good ground, you're safe, you're functioning well. What you want to do is find out where you're not. So, scores of 20 or lower here. You have notes which help you to understand what the deficiencies, energetically speaking, and therefore 3D weaknesses of a person who is behaving like a righteous virgin. You have corresponding notes that help you to understand clues to the kinds of behaviors that you're manifesting subconsciously, where you're behaving as a professional victim. Now, there is a purity in the righteous virgin which, if brought into balance, has got tremendous strength and value. If it's running at 20 or lower, it won't compensate for someone who's also got a victim tendency working in relation to it, which will then express as fundamentally a label that was given where you would emotionally terrorize people because of the underlying insecurity that's experienced in both of these places. I mean, I'm going to limit my commentary to that kind of level, all right? You will find your notes will help you to understand the same relationship between the perennial martyr, which is another form of victim, okay, and the absolute perfectionist, who is another form of victimizer, but slightly more sophisticated, because they create holographic content, which perennially means they can't be satisfied. They push satisfaction away, they push balance away, by maintaining standards in every aspect of life that means they can never be satisfied. And that means they're locked. They can't actually release some of their potential, they can't draw frequency, in other words. And that will express, depending on how the martyrdom, which is the I am not worthy, fighting with the can't be satisfied because my standards are so high, leads to an expression as an emotional cannibal, or someone who's got this imbalance as a person who's being creative, basically, who's beginning to understand the way that energy works and how it works in the hologram. And the same principle runs all the way through. So you've got the compulsive destroyer and the obsessive projectionist, leading to expressions imbalance as a sorcerer or a wizard. And here the greater tyrant, the sybarite and the satire. I mean, sybarite is a pleasure seeker. A satire is someone who's totally out of control, sensationalist, taking coke and doing all that stuff. And again, you have the product expressed at the manual level of a warden who is the wise, who is the prison warden, holding all of this in a locked situation, or an enlightened liberator. Now, as you as you come down to the end through the triangular summaries and you come into the heart shape and you read through that, you can then go back, having found your overall balances, you can then go back privately and go into the detail and the notes that you have to understand what some of the characteristics of the behavioral patterns that are existing at 3D, the way they're coming out in your life. But when you go to the end, you'll see where they're coming from. Because the tendency is, as all experts and specialists in psychiatry and psychology will tend to do, they tell you it's all your problem. You created all of this because you had a traumatic childhood. That's part of the reason. You creating some of this because you took on 50% of your mother's karma and 50% of your father's karma. That's part of the reason. There are a whole bunch of reasons that are not talked about by experts that don't have anything to do with your immediate physical incarnate experience. And the greater majority, as you will discover, are coming from outside of what you've created in 3D. Right? They are things connected with other forms of you that exist in other time and space, some of whom, living lives according to divine right intention and divine right order, have actually voluntarily entered into temporary contracts where, for example, you've been agreeable at a point in time to go into a very tricky situation to reseed some of the grey line, or to protect it. And to put that in blunt language, some of us have slept with the enemy, quote unquote, not necessarily literally, but some of us have done that in order to serve the greater good. Now, that meant that we went into that situation knowing that we were going to actually compromise our own template. And we went into it knowing that we had the power to undo that element of compromise that we willingly and voluntarily and lovingly did on behalf of the greater whole and the greater good. So there's no need to be embarrassed. There's no need to feel lesser. There's no need to feel as if you let the side down, because most of the time you've acquired some of these little gifts as a result of supporting, and as it were, as a result of actually understanding what was going on and being willing to make sacrifices in the certainty that you had the power and the ability to reincarnate at the appropriate time and to heal all of that stuff that you had to go through then. So there is no need to feel any guilt. There's no need to feel that you've acquired these things for bad or unseemly reasons. In fact, much of the time, you've acquired some of these issues, these healing opportunities, for extremely noble and much, much, much appreciated reasons. So, out of this, at D3, we get our first shot at how we read this. We bring these three into a total here, which represent the first expression in 3D of how we're handling the victim-victimizer game as a whole. All right? If you find that you have a score, a low score down here in relation now to these, you want to go back in the detail and understand what's happening here. Okay? It would mean really that you, energetically speaking, you weren't drawing frequency of any sufficient quantity whatsoever to open up any serious life alternatives for you, to in other words, raise the quality of your choices. But people who come to these classes by and large don't score real badly down here. All right? What you will see as you look across the page at your own totals is you should see from here, you should see a tendency for scores to rise across here. And what they're doing is they're saying that as you reconcile your relationship with the victim-victimizer game and the patterns that you've acquired as you think of it in this life, that your awareness of what you consider to be your spiritual occupation, your spiritual identity, you're beginning through that awareness to pull more primal life force currents in. Now I'll show you another picture of 4 examples in a minute where you can see how the scores run when people are going past the wake-up call point and are beginning to get active in taking themselves seriously, all right, in assuming some of the real aspects of what's referred to as Christ consciousness. And I'll show you how the pattern for someone who's been doing it for longer but working with the kind of material that does make a difference, and again then what it looks like when people are starting to pop their probationary avatar level, which is the best and most interesting snapshot really. than looking at the 3D kinds of, very personal issues, which, as I've said, I would rather avoid. It isn't really any of my business. Right, okay, example 1. Someone who's still asleep. Bearing in mind, don't take these scores absolutely too literally. Okay? These are indications of what the scores would look like within limits. Alright, look, you've got way under 20. You've got a strength in this area, which is not the righteous version but the perennial martyr. So someone would be reconciling that quite well, but being held back by this. And that reflects in a corresponding low manu score. Alright? So the totaling here would be of that kind of order. You'd see possibly the influence of the soul level trying to support the breakout here. So it wouldn't be unusual to see the score slightly higher here. But you get up here, you've got much the same at the oversoul level, which is what this is. And when it comes to the avatar level, it's really not getting through. Okay? So this person is really having a big battle right here about waking up at all or not. And you see what happens when they do respond to the impulse coming from the soul level supported by the oversoul in this example. You'd see the ability to deal with victim-victimizer issues in 3D increase in score from something certainly lower than 60. Right, 55, 56, 57 on down is what that one would look like. But once they started to resolve some of the issues in 3D and pull more of this in, that's expressed by a higher score here, because the ability to deal with the hologram as it is, to find more balance, to find more scope to function, to begin to feel good and express, to be more loving in general terms rather than trapped by circumstance and fear-related contractive behaviors which limit the flow of the frequency. You would see that the person's score at this level would begin to rise to the 70s on up. And this is beginning to show that there's a transfer of frequency happening through the grids that connect all of these together, where temporarily, as a person's going through a life transition, you see at the soul level, frequency is actually tending to be pushed into here, which is weakening this temporarily. But you start to see, though, that these two levels, the oversoul and the avatar, would be rising in support of this, just as they were rising here in support of that. The same process is running up through the entire system. Okay, so this person here is just about ready to pop. And if we go to the next page, really wake up. You got the next page, you'll see that kind of principle runs on. So now, they've moved through the point where the soul level was drawing frequency, or needing frequency, from the oversoul level. At this level now, soul integration is going through completion. That is being reflected in this particularly high score here. This is holding steady because it's taken frequency from up here to support oversoul. All right? This is stabilizing or balancing at a healthy level, because you're going to be looking for a point at which you've got good balance all the way across as you're coming into the kind of self-realization where you're hitting the amusingly termed avatar on probation, beginning to really come into shape, where the way that the analysis would go if we went beyond this point would take on different proportions entirely. This is just a structure that takes you from the kind of reality and the way we know it now, the kind of issues that we're dealing with, the things we're trying to achieve, what that looks like as you start to really begin to activate and how it changes. And you'll find that each level above will support the one below as people are making transitions through different levels of awareness. So ultimately, when this is the case where soul integration, people have got their act together very well, and they would be doing many more right things than wrong things in terms of self-support, handling power right, handling relationships in group and individually and so on like that. Until then, you'd find that the scores were really coming up, beginning to level out. You wouldn't be seeing a lot of variation. But here, as you're coming into this level, as you begin to draw frequencies that contain this kind of consciousness more and more into your field, as you're reversing the aparte into alignment with divine blueprint, then generally speaking the scores are increasing because you're pulling more consciousness in, right? And in that sense, as you answered the question in the quiz, the fact that you had that consciousness available to you in your field will be reflected in the totals that were being registered down here. So you can deduce from that if you're not making scores of this kind of level here, it's showing you that you're not pulling either one type or another type, or even all three types of frequency into your fields. All right? So what you can do, as I already said, is you can, whichever of these levels you're looking at, wherever you're seeing the deficiency or the weak area, bear in mind that you've got another one next to and above it that's offering support. That's happening all the way through, and it works that way all the time. That you can track it back and go right back to a specific density level and a specific aspect of experience. I mean, that harmonic universe in dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. You can see where the issue is, where the blockage is in the frequency flow, and you can go and address it. And what helps us do that? So we go all the way to the top in order to come back to the beginning, which is when you come to this page. What's happening is that all of the E-ray scores, which would be power node 1, 4, 7, 10, and so on, and all of the Mane, which is 2, 5, 8, and 11, and all of the Manu, which is 3, 6, 9, 12, are all being brought together as a means to identify how these detailed things that we've been going through on the last 2 or 3 pages, it's saying, okay, where is the imbalance really expressed in terms, literally, of the 3 primary life force currents. And when we get to that point, we have 2 batches of information, some from July and some from a couple of days ago. And the first level that we had was if you're dominant in E-ray, which is the circles that correspond to each of the rays, I didn't point out earlier, but each of the dimensional levels corresponds to one of the rays. All right? If you're dominant in female, which corresponds to Particum, okay, left side of the Cathara grid, which is a pulling, the characteristic of E-ray is to pull. It contracts, it tends to be passive, all of it a bit consistent with so-called female role models. All right, has an association with sound, associated with the violet flame. Now, what this is telling you is that with deficiencies, which are E-ray based, can be adjusted because of the relationship with E-ray as a frequency and sound as an expression. It means that to work with the sons, for example, is one way of easily concentrating an intake of E-ray as frequency. In other words, it will select. If you work with sound as a technique, it by its nature will pull more E-ray into your field if you're E-ray deficient. So if you track back to the very beginning, when you were looking at the 3 spheres across the page, and if you're looking in D1 or in D4, and you've got a really awful score, like 15 or 16 or 17, showing that you're not a bad person, but you're deficient in E-ray, by coming to the overall summary and looking at it in these terms, E-ray, Mane, and Manu, it will show you that the way of dealing with that on an energetic level is to see that you can use sound and breathing techniques to pull disproportionately concentrated amounts of E-ray frequency through your constricted plumbing system while you're working with other techniques to expand your plumbing system, that you can compensate greatly in the immediate time while you're working with some attitudinal shifts and various things like that, and the technique. These are they're here to support you by pulling highly specific parts of the three primal life force currents, the strongest ones available to us, into your fields in order to create your own personal healing method. That's what it's doing. It's saying here are the means by which you can create your own bespoke healing system that will pull frequencies into your field that match exactly where you are deficient and at what level, because this combined with the detail analysis will show you where they are. So that, for example, you could take any of the songs that we provided, whether it's the earliest and almost forgotten Omeda, through the Song of Lyra, Song of Kamalatia, any of the songs, the subsequent songs, the one-liners like the Akasha. And if, say, that you saw that you had E-ray deficiency in sphere 1 and, say 4, all right, they correspond also to chakra positions, right? So you know that sound and the instructions here on breathing, inhale more slowly and more deeply, hold briefly, exhale fast, short and sharp. You could actually practice doing the songs with or without the breathing technique, and you could focus and pull the frequency directly into the chakras that correspond to the little spheres on the very first page to the area of deficiency. So you can provide healing nutrition to the very location, or if you want to think of it as the location of your own parts, your other selves that are in a different space-time vector, that are carrying a load from another compromised experience in what they call their lives, and you can heal them from here by doing that. You know, if you happen to have an issue with the D3 sphere, then obviously it's you here and the other parts of you that are wandering about on planet Earth right now. Well, because in all likelihood there are another 11 of you somewhere right now, at least. So the same principle that I'm spending a little time with, and I'm sorry I forgot, but this really is part of the next lot they've given us. But there are sensitivities too of utilizing color in relation to this. So you could, if you wanted to, if you have a meditation room or something, you could utilize the colors to create a background where you'd use the frequencies inherent to the colors whilst you were working with the sound. So you can create a healing environment that is really keyed to the very specific deficiencies in frequency, because this issue is about deficiencies in frequency. It's about the inability to draw it and hold it and have it, right? And you are talking about healing from the standpoint of clearing out the pipe work that's preventing the frequency from flowing. And once the frequency flows, what you do is you re-establish divine template in your shields, right? And divine template and shields and immortality and not knowing what illness is all go together. So we don't have to think about healing back pain in a very narrow sort of way. We think about healing multidimensionally, which is what this is bringing us around to. But it's also saying, as you individually identify and experience it through the quiz, you can start to work with yourself and your other parts, wherever you see them as being, according to the low score, right? And you can create very specific little programs that you could run for a week or two at a time. And then, without kidding yourself, once a month you go back to the questionnaire, which raises another point. You go back to the questionnaire and do the questionnaire over again. And do it really, really impulsively. And check your score. Alright? There's two things just cropping up and being reminded of. One is that since the introduction of this little package in Bermuda, there's been a whole bunch of people in the professions of various kinds have approached the office asking permission to utilize it, and here and now I'm announcing in England that anybody who wants to work with this in integrity for the good of other people, you don't need to ask for permission. I mean, the copyright protection is not being held on it at all. So it belongs to all of us, and if you want to use it, not just for yourselves but other people, you're very willing to do that. So I tend not to like to read off the slides. I mean, everything that you need to know, having spent little time discussing E-ray as an example. The principle I've been explaining as far as the E-ray and sphere 1 and sphere 4, which is an E-ray, and sphere 7, it applies just the same. So if you find that you look at, if you've got, say, your score in sphere 8 and 11 are really poor, really weak scores. What it's showing you is you're deficient in Mane, and the identities that are currently occupying dimensions 8 and dimensions 11, the parts of you that are there have some compromise in their personal shields. And you here are going to say, okay, I understand that as a result of what I've been able to do now, and now I have the insight to understand that you guys, whoever you are, I might not have met you yet, I might not have remembered you in terms of incarnational memory, but I know, I can see that you need my help. And you go into this and you notice that there's a tendency that these characters are probably more likely to be male if they're Mane, but there could be some real pushy ladies there, for you to get to know. You know that they're sensitive to light, which is rather than sound. I mean, light is less strong than sound, activating the flame body is this kind of level. Playing with light body is the thing that can get a bit complicated by the wrong kinds of influences. But here you'd find that you've got all the information with the ray colors. Here you talk about utilization of light. We're talking about a different kind of breathing, all right? We're talking about a high visual orientation rather than one that relates to inner ears. So what I didn't mention was that inner hearing is more likely to be an opportunity for someone who has got strength in that area, and visual, in terms of communication, to a person who's got strength in that area. And while I'm talking about it, if you've got strength in Manu, which reflects strength in both of these, but this can still be the overriding one, then direct cognition is the strength that you tend to have in terms of your communication, like allowing yourself just to know, and having the guts and the confidence to stand up in front of a bunch of people believing that you really do. Oi. And so anyway, the principle goes all the way through, and we're picking off particular color frequencies here which are supportive to any of the soul family that exists in any of the dimensions there. And of course the Manu is with 3, 6, 9, 12 and 13, and all of that applies just the same way. And an extra note at the bottom here, extra emphasis on frequency spin direction Son and Sueras in relation to the corresponding Ire or Mane within the Manu Merkaba Kasha salutations is highly recommended, so that you can actually use the salutations according to the appropriate nature of the frequency that they're playing with, Ire or Mane, basically. You can actually increase the time you spend spinning in one direction or another to actually further reinforce your activity in either of those two areas. And I'm mindful that you want to get off to dinner. I will just point out that the last two pieces of paper that you were given, thanks, are just a little bit of an extension on what we got through for July, and this is just telling you what you got, basically. This is to do with identifying your Christic and Rishik capstone nodes. These are the mutable nodes that we're dealing with, and the information you're being provided with are the association. When you look at the heart-shaped totals will show you which is your primary Christos founder and Brunauer Rishi race collective you are presently associated with. So you know where to look in terms of members of the GIA who are willing to work with you. It will also give you your flame group association, again, which is the predominant color frequency that you want to be working with, the primary contact ray through which internal communication is presently occurring, and that's the most easily accessible frequency path for intertime multidimensional communication. This will all guide you in terms of your little personal menu, right, of how you create for yourself something that heals but at the same time opens. It's not just a case of talking about the way we are with the hologram right now and the frustrations we experience about not having the power. We're talking about the power. This is the power. All of this stuff is showing you where the power is. Just go get it. All right? And this is telling you where to get it specifically in terms of the quiz analysis that you've just created for yourself to use. This is just a toolkit. Right? It's telling you which spanners to use for what particular issues. It also provides you with each of the primary capstone tones through which the personal shields and ray currents can presently and be most rapidly activated, and it's also showing you the core evolutionary lessons in personal power management that you're presently, quotes, exploring.
I think
you do?
The tones for Manu and Ire are reversed back here.
What have you got in there?
Because Ire has Ra and Ki, and Manu has Kun She.
Yeah, and they gave us some new tones today, which are different from the ones on the Bermuda copies. I'll double check that tonight. I can't comment right now.
Okay.
But I know that the tones are developed from the ones that we work with in Bermuda. Now, unless check where is Ra?
Well, I'm thinking, in terms of like Ki, Roche, Tindere. Anyway, my understanding is like Ki is 13, so that would be Manu, and here it goes with Ire.
Okay, then there could be a transposition there that's not right. But I'll check it tonight. Thank you for pointing it out. Okay. Well, we trust that the affiliations that are listed here are not transposed in any way, but I'm assuming they're not. Now, on each of the sheets, again, these are not things I need to keep you here to talk about because I'm not adding anything to what's already written down for you to read. Okay, but it would actually show you in rather more generalized terms what the issues and the lessons that are being shared through you as a representative of your soul group, right here and now, that exist if you have the deficiencies in frequency that are associated by each of the Ire, Mane, and Manu. And that will help you to fill out your picture a little bit more, both in terms of what sorts of issues to look at in general, what sorts of additional insights in terms of members of the greater cosmic family, the forms that the frequencies take, whether it's in terms of color frequency, whether it's in terms of tones, albeit that point's been made over here, and also the means of contact array and the kind of affiliations in universal karma, which is stuff that I think that we're going to get more on possibly by the time we go to Ireland, but not for this weekend, I don't think. They're giving a whole bunch of stuff right now. Ashana's taking transmission. They gave me a new symbol, which is one of two. We're not sure which it is at the moment. So they're giving us a symbol to work with this weekend that we didn't expect. And they're giving some keys for unlocking certain of the core aspects that relate to the anchoring of the Rushia pillars and the sequences. So it looks like there's a whole bunch of new information coming in overnight tonight. So I'll let you go to dinner. We'll grab something to eat and we'll carry on working. So we could be bleary-eyed tomorrow, by the way things are shaping up. I'm sorry to be so rushed. I've done it as fast as I can. I've had to cut corners everywhere, but that's the way it is. You have all the notes, though. There isn't anything that I can think of that I missed out or not emphasized. So with that, we'll thank you for your time and forbearance. Okay. Good night. Have a good supper.
With the activations that we're going to do today, we're going to do the flame body activations, and we're going to first explain them as we go along. And we'll start with the first one, which in about 5 minutes. We're going to do this one. It's the Akasha seal, and that's the beginning level of activations that the rest of them hinge on. It's not a long one. This is a pretty easy one. So we'll start with that, and then we will go into flame body anatomy and finding out more about what is this mysterious thing called our flame body. Then we'll go into, this afternoon, I believe, our shadow body anatomy and what that is and what it's doing to us. And by the end of the day, we will have gone through all of the 12 techniques. I'm still working on getting typeset technique 12 because it isn't in your books. This was one of the new ones that was given while we were in France. And I've been up since about 5 this morning because they were giving new information on it. When we went to France, it was really funny. It was like, well, okay, do this, here's this code, do this. What are we doing? I don't know. It has to do with the activation of Stargate 12 because it's starting to open. That's all we had. They said it was on security clearance. They couldn't give it to us until we were off the grids over there. And they're giving it to us now, obviously. But it has to do with what's called the 1111 and 1212 activations. And this has to do with something that a few people on the France trip were picking up little bits and pieces of, and they didn't know what it meant or where it fit with anything. It was something about resetting the cosmic clock. What in the world is that, right? And I don't know. I haven't heard it expressed that way. I'm not really sure what that refers to. Well, we're getting the download on the cosmic clock. The cosmic clock are the 12 Ruche pillars up from the Akasha Aya level. And there's a rather technical explanation of when a certain level of critical mass damage is reached in any of the lower God worlds or in the lower Veka heavens, that there will come a point in time where the system, this is why it's a perpetual life, eternal life system, it will kick in to a resetting of the cosmic clock. we've been due for that for quite a while. And it was just up to within a small window of when that could occur, when it would take place. And we are entering the initiation phase of that. This makes tomorrow's workshop even more interesting because I don't know half of it yet, but I will by tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, there was enough. There was like 3 days' worth of stuff to cram into tomorrow anyway, but now we have to weave that all in with the cosmic clock stuff that has to do with the next level of activations that this group is getting, that the only time these were given before was spontaneously in the in the France trip, and without any explanation of what they really were on the higher levels, how they applied to the flame body and all of that. So we will have those explanations, at least some of them, by tomorrow. But today we need to get through to the point where at the end of this evening we can do Technique 12. It's the induction of Vecca codes, not Vecca codes, Scepter Code 12 and Eka Code 12, which Eka Code 12 is the Rihanayana and Scepter Code 12 is the El Hayale. That is referred to as the 12-12 activation. Now they're induced and then they're activated in the shields by using what is called a linguistic template reprogramming grid, but this one's in Anahazi, which is the ancient language, the first language. And you use them together to activate the Rishaic shield. And it's a very powerful activation. We did it kind of in pieces in France, but it's actually all one technique that's going to be done at the end of today. And that prepares us for 13 through 19 tomorrow. It's like, if things start to move any faster, I'm just going to sit down and watch it go by, because it's just, you just watch it go and you're trying to keep up with it, and it's very, very difficult sometimes. What the new information is implying is that there are some absolutely incredible things taking place within the Templar system from the Eka worlds all the way down. And we'll do our best to translate the technicals so they make sense to us. But it's also something that people other than Nazarites are going to be experiencing and participating in as well. Because basically there are two tracks of time that are going to emerge, and that point of where the time track that is one right now starts to split is May 27th of 2003. There are certain things that our bodies have to be able to do and our shields have to be able to do by then, or we will not be able to catch the ascending track of time, which means we will be caught in the other one. The other descending track of time, you're going to see lots of New Agers out there doing all sorts of grid activations to activate the Flaming Blue Sword Metatronic implants. They are going to activate their rays, and we are going to activate the God rays in the ARC project, which is the resetting of the cosmic clock, the Riche pillars. And progressively, between that point and 2012, December 21st, 2012, those two parts of the Earth's shield are going to progressively pull away from each other. I can understand the dynamics of the physics involved on the inside, but what in the world this is going to look like on the outside, I can't tell you. We're going to walk through something that's really unprecedented in the history of this planet, except for maybe on Terra, because it's also known, this whole thing. Now, the cosmic clock is reset by the final code that has to be entered on May 27th, is called the Christ code. There are 12 Christ codes. They're up above the Riche level codes, and it's number 1 Christ code. What this whole event was recorded as, because it was known for ages. I mean, this stuff was in the Mayan calendar. It was woven into biblical revelations. It was known as the second coming of the Christ, or Christ. It got translated into down here. This is what they meant in the totality of it, because what it is doing is literally bringing in the full spectrum of the 12 Riche pillars from the Akasha Aya core God world level, not just the Eka, not just the Akasha, just the Akasha A, but literally opening up all the gate sequences that allow for the pillars to come in. And the pillars don't just stand there. They rotate. They spin. They're like large Merkaba fields. And they spin frequency down through the gates. What has been explained so far is that the shields all the way down, the Aeonic levels of the Aeonic shield and our Rishaic shields, and this is on a universal level and a personal one, and then down into the Maharic shields all the way down to density 1. The center point in the shields, which is the Azure point in the Cathara grid, now in our bodies it's in the thymus, they are going to literally be opened sequentially all the way down to allow first the 13th pillar, which is really the center point, the Amareya flame, to come down in the center. And that will initiate in the grids on May 27th of 2003. We have to have our shields, our body and our shields ready to hold that activation, because if you don't catch that wave when that frequency comes in, you can't catch it after the fact, because that's when the split begins, when you have the blue sword current coming in on one side and you have the D13, the natural, it's not D13, it's the 13th pillar, Amareya current from the Akasha Aya coming in. And literally your shields are going to either go with one or the other. Parts of your shields that are still turned around will actually start to separate at that point from the parts that are still in their divine blueprint. So the activations that we're doing are preparing us for this cosmic scale event. It's called the Cosmic 1111 activation. Now, we've gone through smaller 1111 activations while we were in France that we didn't know about. We'll talk about that more in detail tomorrow. But there is an event called the Cosmic 1111 that's coming in, and that is for May 27th. It initiates then. Now, initiation is when a frequency first anchors. All right. From that point, there's a process or a bit of a time while it pulsates in the grids until it spreads out completely in the grids. When it completely fills the grids, it's called the consummation or the activation point. The initiation of the 1111 13th pillar is going to be May 27th of 2003, and the consummation of it is going to be August 12th of 2003. Which is the time period that is called the magnetic peak, when the planetary and it's actually the universal magnetic Merkaba fields are at their highest spin rate. And that is going to initiate the beginning of the progressive anchoring of the 12 pillars. 13 comes in first, and then from low to high, the others come in. And it's about every year, and it'll be the same dates. It will go from an initiation in... they will initiate in August, on August 12th of each year, and they will consummate or finish their activation on December 21st of each year until you get to the year 2012, where the last three anchor together. That ought to be an interesting year. What's really fascinating? I know, you just read my mind. What you said was birthday for Daddy, is it? Yeah, because that's actually his birthday, the 21st of December. So, interesting birthday present. But if I seem a little spacey, I just got down from translating. I was just on the computer, said, I've got to stop now. I've got to get down to do the workshop. But I wanted to share that with you while it was ripe and while it was still running. The frequency of it was still running. This is something really big, and it ought to be interesting to watch what the other groups are going to mobilize to do with their side of it, because they need to activate and anchor as well. But what they're anchoring is the blue sword frequencies, the D13 reverse frequencies. They are actually plugging part of our grids into their twisted universal clock and ripping them away from the natural time pulsations of the cosmic clock. We've been in a time loop here since 25,500 BC on Earth. And literally going around to a certain point, you couldn't pass that in the shields and start to go backwards and start all over again. So we've literally been trapped in a time loop here. This is the process of lifting that time loop permanently and getting our stargates and our galactic stargates, and not just our planetary ones, and our universal ones back into natural synchronization with the ones from the Echo worlds and the God worlds that are higher. And it's a monumental event. There's always been this secrecy around the 11, 11, 12, 12. What is it? What is it? And it's several things that are all tied in together. But at the core of what that secret code refers to, it's referring to the combinations of Veka codes, Eka codes, Scepter codes, all of those things that get activated in sequence. It is the hidden sequence of what gates you open first, what ones you open next, to anchor the 12 Rushe pillars to reset the cosmic clock. And that I didn't know that until this morning either. So I figured I'd share that with you before we get into the more down-to-earthly things of finding out a little bit more about our flame bodies and about using them, their activation, to heal the shadow. The shadow stuff I think we'll get to probably, I think I have it scheduled for this afternoon, the early afternoon set, the session after the morning session. And before that, I'm just going to start with kind of a bit where we left off, where again, this is, let me find my pointer. This is your Maharic shield. And what I have here is I've actually transposed the numbering of both the nodes and the DNA strands. The DNA strands actually correspond to the nodes, but when we show DNA strand graphs, we just show them in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going around like that. But I did make the node notations that show you the node Rouchet, because then you get 12, 3, 6, and 9 in the right positions, but you have 10 and 11 over here instead of 1. So it's just really showing you the consolidation of the two diagrams. What this is really meant to just remind us of is the problem with the Metatronic implants in our shields. There are 6 of them altogether. There are 4 what are called black hearts. And what they are two, if you take an akasha shape, which is a natural shape of what a radio body field should be when it's activated. If you cut that in half, force it into sticking it into another halved one, and then turn it upside down, you get a heart. So that's why they're referred to as the 4 black hearts of Metatron. This is what they do to the natural currents that are coming from our side and coming, from the phantom and the Weesadite matrix. But it just shows, this diagram shows, and I think you have this one in your books, page 35. And it's just simply showing you the location of the 4 black hearts. Now, if you read this, it tells you which heart it is. It also tells you when it began activation, because there's been a progressive activation in our grids here of these particular implants. Now, some of them were activating and infecting us, but they weren't even in our bodies here, from the Terran time cycles up in density 2 and the Gaian time cycles up in density 3. So these are really when the hearts started to come into activation. 22,326 BC here, we began getting the effect of the first heart. The second heart is, let me find number 2. I'm having a problem with my eyes this morning, by the way. Just a little slow. This one's the heart of the dragon. It's at D7.75. Creates the dragon shadow. That began activating here in 9,558 BC. And that was the period of what was called the fall of Atlantis. That's when Atlantis had fallen down in pieces. Before that, it had been a continent, and it partly was ripped. Part of its grids were literally ripped down and taken into first Phantom Earth and then into the Weesadite matrix. So this is like the rising of the Atlantean masters, is what they like to call it. Except the masters are the masters of the Weesadite matrix. All right. So the second one began activating in 9,558 BC in our shields, in the grids, in the planetary grids. So that means it began activating in our race line as well. It also means, because we have incarnations back in these time frames, that they are experiencing the activation, like you are experiencing it back there. And because this is an ascension cycle where all the gates open and all the gates in your DNA open to your other time selves, it means these activations from other times come up into our bodies, and ours go back into their bodies as well. All right, so this one over here is the third heart. It's called the Heart of Delphi. It's the Palladian heart. It's at D4.4. There should be a 7. 4.75. It's called the Delphic shadow. That was activated in 3,470 BC during an event called the Babylon Massacre. That is the period of time where it created memory wipe, where we really just lost the cellular memory, the ability to plug in our cellular memory. And that's where we got a lot of junk DNA that started to manufacture in our chemical DNA, because it shut off the template. The grid damage from that activation shut off the template in our DNA, so the chemicals wouldn't manifest. So we literally have all this stuff called junk DNA, which are dormant sequences that don't seem to do anything. And they don't do anything because their templates beneath them were shut off by this grid distortion. And let's see, the fourth heart of Anubis. It's at D1.75. It's called the Anubis shadow. March 23rd, 2002 is when it first initiated. All right, so it's just starting, and we're moving into its activation phase. It will fully activate on May 27th of 2003, because on that date, the blue sword frequencies are coming in and anchoring in the planet fully. They've initiated already, but they're going to anchor and activate in the grids on that date. So this is why we have a little bit of a time crunch as far as getting our shadow bodies healed as much as possible, because whatever part of your shadow body still is in reversal, which means a part of your shields are still holding reverse mathematics, they will separate, begin a progressive separation from the parts that are holding divine blueprint. And at least you're fortunate they have some divine blueprint left, because if not, you just all reverse. You go into what's called monadic reversal, where the center point in the DNA configuration and the center point of the shield reverses mathematical coding completely, and that's called being Metatronic. And that's when you go on a journey. Your evolution will be on a journey into the Wisadek system. So, we are being given the flame body activations at a very rapid rate in order to get us all prepared and our bodies and our shields prepared to purge these implants. Now, these implants can only be purged as they activate, which means you can't get rid of them first. You have to actually hold the activation in your body and run the other frequencies that have the ability, the frequencies from the flame bodies, that have the ability to transmute the twisted frequency as it comes out and to separate whatever can't be transmuted away from you. So we need to get as much of our shadows in, because that's energy, that's our energy, parts of ourselves. And the more of our shadow that we lose, the less of our shields we're going to have left. Tomorrow we'll get into talking about this 31 to 51% thing, which has to do with how much divine blueprint is left in your shields and in your DNA. That literally determines what of basically 4 optional paths you're going to have for evolution during this time, but also after you leave the body, either through the death transition or through ascension. So it becomes very, very significant what we do right now, because we're preparing for a big party that's going to happen in 2012. What that's going to look like, I still keep asking, what is it going to look like on the outside? I understand the mechanics on the inside, and I'll help you to do that to the best of my ability tomorrow. But I still can't fathom what grid separation, complete grid separation, and getting one part of the grids going on one-time pulsation while the other part goes on a descending. One is slowing down and moving backward into the past, and one's accelerating and moving forward into the future. What is this going to look like? I mean, that's something to play with, something to ask your guys about, your own, guidance system. Because it'll probably be a little different for all of us, but it'll probably be a lot the same as well, where there'll be certain things that we all move through. I know there's probably going to be progressive building of conflict politically in the system, but that will be evidence of the downward spiraling track. But what are we going to be doing, right? Everybody else is going to get into a war, and they're going to do the World War III drama or something. Okay, we still have to live in countries that they're technically still the leaders of. There's not like a little island you can go sit on floating up in the sky that you can wait till the bridge zone opens. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to be, the ascending and descending paths are going to be literally stuck together and progressively moving apart, but within that stuck space. It's like a big Akasha bubble that's going to hold the two of them in place while they move apart. And then in 2012, that is when they fall out of the Akasha bubble because they can't hold the activation. So, I don't know. I get fascinated sometimes when the next level of technicals come down, like they did today. I also get very tired. That's why I'm a little kind of slow motion. But this is what we're preparing for, and this is what we're getting rid of, these little monsters here. And it's really, there's such a, when you see the shadow body diagram, and and I explain that to you what it is, there's such a violation here, you just want to slap them. I mean, you can love them anyway. Yes, we're all part of the one, and yes, they're very confused and they're very ill, obviously, because people who are not ill don't do things like this. However, when you look at the level of violation and the disgusting thing that they have done to our bodies, that these implants do to our bodies, and it's not just our bodies. They have progressively taken down other race lines in our matrix. There were a group called the Procyonies that were from what we call the star Procyon, and they were a Seraphi race, a hominid Seraphi race that were, they looked human-like, and they were very Nordic-looking. They looked blonde. They were very, very blonde, and they were good guys. They were guardian guys. There was a progressive infiltration of their system, just like here, over many, many generations, contaminating the gene code, progressively getting themselves on planet, that kind of thing, until they had their point when they were when it was time to reset their cosmic clock, and they weren't able to do it. And it literally pulled their whole system down into the Wisadek matrix. Part of it's still stuck in Phantom. But they literally took out a race line where they destroyed its natural template. There are no more Procyonies of that particular strain left. And that's what they were trying to do here. That's why we're at the point in time where what was the Orifeme angelic human either will begin its new Hyale reborn cycle, or it will turn into something else that it was never intended to be, and it won't live in this matrix anymore. So that's literally the point that we're at in time, and it's fascinating to find that out, especially if you didn't know any of this, like when you came in on Friday. What? At least we've been getting beamed with this for the last 4 years or so. So it's we've had a little preparation. So now it's not a scary time. It's also a time of celebration, and I don't want to lose that sentiment. This is a time we've all waited for. We don't remember the waiting because we don't have our memory back. But if we could remember our other selves in our other time frames, we all suffered, a lot of us, knowing this time would come, protecting the gene line so we'd have the codes in our body to do this, and being so tired of the whole game. This started 250 billion years ago, for goodness sakes. Get over it already, But most of us are very, very tired of the whole thing, and they are too, which is a very nice place to be. There's only one thing that the Wisadek groups and the Guardian groups agree on, is that both of them are very tired of the game, and both would like the other ones to go their way in peace. Now, the Wisadeks would prefer if we went our way in pieces, just like them, because this separation isn't a sad thing. It's a joyful thing for both sides. This is what's fascinating. They are absolutely delighted. They get us out of their face. They get us out of their way. They can run their own little universe until it implodes. They'll deal with that when they get there. But they don't have to follow the rules anymore. They don't have to have people telling them what the cosmic rules are anymore. They can make their own rules and find out what's going to happen to them. They already know what's going to happen to them. They made that choice. But they get 2 billion years of evolution in their black hole system where they get to play masters of the universe. They get to play superhero creator gods and boss all these little people around that they can create because they sucked all this energy and now they can create little beings down in their lower densities. They can have a grand party before they go. That's what they want. That was the choice they made. It just shows how little of the Christos they remember. Because if you remember or have any feeling at all for the actual connection to Source, to the Christos, you'd never ever make a decision like that. Because any little finite party that you can go to is not worth the consequence of not being able to experience the direct connection. Because then you can create anything you desire. But it is at least positive in knowing that both sides, all the way up, are at peace with what is happening. And they're not fighting with each other about it. We're not fighting with either of the Wisadek groups, the Anunnaki-based ones or the Drak-based ones. They are fighting with each other. Expect to see and experience in our hologram. But right now we're on the time crunch, that it's all happening very fast, and there's a small time to prepare. Now, indigos are mostly the people that come to these workshops. If you come, you usually have an indigo imprint somewhere in there, because just the frequency that we're transmitting out on now. If you get a group, even this size, of indigos that activate, they could literally pull up millions of people, which means they could run enough frequency into the grids of the flame body that whatever people had, even a small part of their divine blueprint left, they could help to support them. So what we're doing with ourselves is the beginning of helping everybody else. In helping ourselves, we actually help the masses. There will be times, I imagine, when this... I'm almost afraid to think about it. I look at some of the other movements that are being run by the Metatronic crew. They're big. They're big movements. I could name names, but I won't because I don't want to be bothered getting sued for slander. But basically, if you pick up just about any itinerary of speakers in any of the fancy things they do in the United States as far as, who's who on the circuit and that kind of thing, they are all either the Anunnaki or the Drak versions of either the Wisadeks or the ones in Phantom that are trying to fight with the Wisadeks, which is hopeless because they have nothing to fight with over there. So it's really interesting. I would like at some point, they've put me on hit lists, literally. There was one that's called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and they put me on their ugly hit list. Meaning that, we teach bad, fear-based stuff, right? Well, they're teaching this healing system that was... put across as, the greatest healing system yet to come, and getting you to activate things in your body without telling you much about your anatomy, and getting certain frequencies to come in from the universe to you without knowing particularly what part of the universe you were going to pull them from, and go around and transmit them to everybody. These things are implant shops, and they're all over the place. And I've always been kind of glad, but good. I don't want to be number one on the circuit. I don't want groupies. I'm not interested in that. Neither is Az. We've never been like that. It was hard enough for me to get out and even speak because I actually dropped out of college because I had a public speaking course. And I got an A on the written part, but then it was time to present it. And I wouldn't do it. Yeah, and that was going to, like, she was going to fail me, and it was going to pull down my whole grade point average and take me off the dean's list. So I figured, forget it. And I dropped out. I literally did. I mean, just the idea of having to interface with the public. I was so shy before. But anyway, this is the mess we're going to clear when I get through this, so we can get to activation 1, and then we'll come back and get into the technicals and understanding flame body. These are the 4 Metatronic heart implants. This thing here, it's called the 666 Beast Seed Atom. It's a seal. It's an implant, and it's also called the Apollyon seal. And it's interesting because that's a name of a demon that, in like biblical terms, and in I believe the Jewish tradition especially, that is like the big devil over the little devil. His name Apollyon, and that comes out of it's affiliated with the word Apollo. So when you get into the Greek gods and all that kind of stuff, they were all just about Wesedek names. We found that out when we went to the Greece trip. It was mind-blowing. They were named after some of the planets in the Wesedek matrix system, it was called the Black Cube matrix. So it's like, be careful who you're calling on up there. So the 666 seed atom, this is the thing that in the DNA template, it's between strands 6 and 7, and that puts like at 6, I believe it's right in between strands 6 and 7, 6.5, and that would place it kind of like in between the strands, right in the fire code. Remember, the fire codes between the strands are the things that when they activate, they allow for the strand braiding to take place, which is necessary to create the chemical celestine, the elemental celestine in the chemicals in the DNA. This is located in one of the fire codes. And there are also some other things called Jehovian seals that we talked about earlier. They were the thing we had to worry about first. They were a phantom matrix implant as opposed to a Wesedek matrix implant system. The Jehovian seals were enough to rip the grids apart and to harm our bodies quite a lot. And again, you had to wait till they activated to transmute them as they went instead of trying to pull them. You couldn't pull them out. You'd actually rip your shields apart. Well, they look tiny compared to the Metatronic ones. And what the Metatronic ones do is they plug into and feed frequency into the Jehovian seals. And the Jehovian seals then activate more rapidly. So they actually use the Jehovian seal network that was put in by a competing group from the Phantom Matrix and use that as part of the mechanism to make the template reverse faster. So it's really a mess to think that anything could get away with, first of all, have the intelligence to do this, and then have that level of intelligence with that level of heartlessness, that they could do something like this and work really, really hard at it. I mean, they put a lot of time into this. They've been building this beast for ages. But it's pretty amazing that what it's going to do. This is the seed atom, the Metatronic seed atom, that in terms of the body, it would be in the Azure point. In terms of the planetary Cathara grid of the gates, it would be in between gate 6 and 7, the middle point. So it is the Azure point that is located in. That's why as we start flame body activations, if you get a cold or you start getting, just like cold symptoms, chakras 4, 5, and 8. Excuse me. I wasn't doing that to demonstrate either. No, I went through my demonstration in Phoenix. I went through the whole Phoenix workshop and for a whole month after, where I was just absolutely sick. Had like major bronchitis stuff out of nowhere. Got it as soon as we got on the plane to go over to to Santa Fe and then to Phoenix, and that's when we started this activation. So if you get any issues with this area, particularly like chakra 4, chakra 5, chakra 8 here, it's because what we're doing is beginning first of all, the thing is activating. The blue sword thing is beginning. It's like initiation. It'll activate on the 27th. It's the beginning and it's initiation. And that's enough to kick up stuff. But we're also activating the flame bodies now and beginning the Azure activations, which are meant to clear it. So there's all sorts of clearing going on in that area. Don't be surprised. But that doesn't mean it has to happen. I've seen people that are starting the activations and they haven't had anything with it so far. But if you get something like that with the cold symptoms, flu symptoms, don't be surprised. I got to the point where it was mine. I guess because probably it was rapid. They had to get it through out of there fast. That level of it was extremely intense. Where I actually took antibiotics. I very rarely rely on external medicine, but it was. I knew if I didn't, I could feel my immune system getting drained by the whole thing. So I actually did. I took penicillin and it cleared it in about 5 days. After I suffered for a month, I said, all right. But it works. So sometimes allopathic medicines can be helpful. That's why we don't teach you to run away from doctors and be one of those faith healer crews or anything like that. You apply both. You take the best of both and use each where they're most important, but always use the spiritual to support whatever external thing you do. Like you can take your penicillin bottle and blast it with D12 frequency. Now, after these activations, you can blast it with the emerald flame of Amaraya. That will improve its quality. And while you're blasting it, just by pushing the frequency through your hands and breathing it into the product, you also send the intention that you will do this for me, and if there's something I can do to help you in your evolution, I would do that also within divine right order. So you actually offer to assist the substances, the consciousness and the substances, while you're requesting that they assist you in a particular way. You can get substances, supplements, anything, medicines to work better for you by asking them to do what it is you want them to do. Ask them not to do what you don't want them to do, how things can have side effects, and offering to help them in whatever divine right order is for them, where you're not going to okay, I'm going to make myself really sick just so I can help you evolve through my system. No. Right? Well, that's why I surrender. It's a divine right order. But you can establish a whole new relationship with things like medicines and supplements and food and all sorts of things. And that will assist in this process. It will assist you in the clearing processes and in the accelerating processes, because we are going through planetary grid accelerations. They started on November 5th, actually, between the 5th and the 6th. And they are going to progressively move upward from there. They're not going to slow down now. So the grids are going to progressively go faster and faster in frequency. They're going to oscillate faster and faster. That means our shields are going to do the same. It means our DNA is going to do the same. There's a lot of frequency our bodies need to process at this point. And using the technology that we have in creative ways, like helping the foods you're taking in to help you so you can help them, think about doing those things. It's not just something, I learned that in a workshop, but I didn't use it for 20 years, that kind of thing. And now's a good time to use those things. We're also going to be given a whole bunch more about supplements and helping the plants and animals to evolve through this, and helping ourselves. They will help us evolve, and we will help them evolve through this. So we're going into the beyond organic farming concept. That's why we were guided to rent a place that has like a large garden area that we can begin planting, and they're going to teach us what foods are compatible, like what plants are compatible and can hold divine blueprint, what ones need healing, and that kind of thing. And then we're going to do probably supplements and things from them, where everything from botanicals to oils to tinctures, those kind of things. And we would probably do the recipes, I would think. Mahagriculture, yeah, like the Maharata, right? Mahagriculture. I think this is Amaraya culture, actually, at this point. It's gone beyond D12. But there's some of the things we have to look forward to, because we're not too much into like manufacturing stuff. We would probably, learn how to make them for ourselves and then share the recipes or publish the recipes so they would be available to other people. And that's something we can look forward to too. But in the meantime, one seal is left. This is called the Avalon seal. And the Avalon seal gets its name from one of the moons that is named Avalon of the D11 in our system, the D11 Universal Gate 11. Stargate 11 is called Avion, and its moon is called Avalon. And it's through Avalon, that moon, that they link in the Arimathea wormhole into our system, and from the Avalon moon, they link it into the Avion 11 gate at 11.5. So that's where it gets its name from. The Avalon seal is also known as the Metatronic Eye. It's D11.5. It opens the Wisadek Arimathea wormhole. It began its initiation on March 23rd, 2002. That's when we went on Plan B. All right. What this is doing in the Universal Templar, it's beginning the opening of that artificial wormhole structure that the blue sword frequencies can run through. What it does in our bodies is do the same thing. It is located at, let's see, D11.5 is 12 6-hour center. It's located, I think, in the pineal. This one, I have another chart that shows where they're located in the body. I'm pretty sure that one's in the pineal. And, it's between, actually it's up a little bit, between the pineal and the crown chakra. Yeah, I'm remembering now. This means we have wormholes opening in our head. And, well, there's a song, I forget who wrote it, I think it was Pink Floyd or something. There was a line in it that said, and the worms ate into his brain. And it was like, that used to stick for some reason in my head. I don't know why. That stupid line from a rock song, it stuck in my head like it was significant. Put it in what I call File 13, which is like the X file in my head, that all the stuff that I don't know what it is yet, that I know is important somehow, I stick in there. Well, that went in there. Now I know why. So we are having wormholes opening in our heads, and what is the solution for all of this is the activation of the flame bodies. And that's the fun part. I mean, it would be joyful. It would be even nicer if we didn't have to deal with any of this stuff, this clearing that's going to happen. This is the great cleansing that a lot of the Native American prophecies had talked about, and there were some other traditions. I think Hopi Indians talked about it, and I think the Mayans had talked about it. The Mayan calendar was all calculated to this, and it ended on, I believe, December 21st of 2012. They're aware of this whole process in Atlantis when those things were given. We purposely were made to forget, but now we're getting the awareness back. Now, the flame bodies can take care of this, but these things, when they activate, it's not like it activates and then you can pull it. It activates one level, and you have to transmute that. Then that's clear. Then it activates the next level. And you have to clear that. They're progressive. They take time to clear. You can't just whip them out or just, knock them down with one shot. So it's a process that we're not going to, once we go through these activations, understanding what our flame bodies and our shadow bodies are first, and then going through the activations that, first of all, build the flame body and then literally decord the shadow dancers, which are the things from the Wisedet matrix that are attaching to you, that are stopping you from being able to turn your shadow body around. Once we get to that point, we don't have to, unless you happen to have some really heavy-duty karma from stuff you might have got yourself into in Atlantis or something, you actually don't have to worry about much of dealing with the shadow body itself directly anymore. You can work with the shadow body techniques after that, like integrating, but you really don't have to. It's the flame activations that will just keep them at bay and keep the shadow progressively transmuting back into, healing into your body. If you do happen to have some heavy-duty contracts that are being called in, because there were contracts made in Atlantis and there were agreements made, and some people got themselves really tied up in those agreements and accepted fire sword initiations there, which means early activation of the blue sword in the bodies. If you've got that to deal with, you won't be able to fully decord a shadow dancer, but you can hold it at bay with the flame. You won't be able to take your body through a gate, but you'll be able to get to the point of whatever your natural death transition would be, and then you can separate from the body at that point and ride your flame out of here so you don't get assimilated. So there is still hope, but it's a different path. The people that can go through gates, we'll get into the percentages, but it has to do with what percent of your divine blueprint is left right now. Because if you got activated in the Atlantean period, that activation is activating in your body now, which is an amplified version of what would normally be happening in the planetary grids. This is what they're trying to do to people in a lot of the workshops that are being conducted. The Archangel Michael workshops, any of the Thoth workshops, any of the Isis workshops. These names, Merlin workshops, these names are all associated with Metatron. Enoch is another one. And I'm not naming the teachers down here. I'm naming who's working with them. And I have a right to do that because they're old contemporaries. I know these people. They know me too, and they're not too happy with me right now. But this is the problem, and the solution is reclaiming what was ours in the first place. The first stage in reclaiming the flame body is beginning a higher level activation of the Maharic seal, which means to bring in more frequency. Now, is there anybody here that never even worked with the Maharic seal? Good. I was going to say, for this level 3, there shouldn't be any hands up on that one. Good. So this one should be easy to move through. Once we get through it, and this one's pretty short, this doesn't take very long. Let me see where I'm going to go next. Let me see. Then we will go into the beginning of understanding our flame body is understanding our radial body and our astral body. So we'll go into a bit on what the heck is your astral body and what is your radial body. And once we understand those, we're also going to go into the first level of what's called Eros flame activation, which is where you activate in your field this lovely little Akasha capsule that's pale silver. It's called the Eros flame, and that's the one that's inside of the larger Amareya flame that will activate in the radial body on the outside. So we'll go through that anatomy to understand it. It will be after the lunch break that we will do the shadow, but we will do the positive, the exciting stuff first, and get us through, I think, four activations before lunch, I think. Let me see. Oh, excuse me a minute. Yeah, see, this is why I needed that other sheet that I left in the room. I had it all written down. All right, I just want to see how many we're doing before lunch for both of our information. FYI, I think 4. Yeah, we will get up to Technique 4 before lunch, and, well, that is the agenda anyway. And Then we will go into shadow body anatomy when we get back, and then we'll go into the techniques that further activate the flame and begin the clearing, or actually setting the ground for healing the shadow body, because there's several steps you have to do before you can do the higher steps. You need to set the frequencies for the lower ones. So, if I can interrupt you, my darling, can I interrupt you? Can you run one, please? Okay. And while you run one, I'm going to run upstairs and get the sheet I forgot. Okay. Thank you. Now, I had it open. Here it is, yeah. Yeah, and it's simply called the Akasha Quick Seal Activation, and it's a fast one. It tells you about it on page 36. It'd be good to read this, too, if you could. Okay, like what it does, that kind of thing. Okay, and I will turn this over to you. Thank you. I'll be right back.
Totally.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Do you know where the light switches are? We can just dim the lights just a little. Because it helps in the activations to not have too much sensory overload on the outside. Yeah, it allows you to focus more easily inside. I wonder what would happen if you did this stuff in a sensory deprivation chamber. It would be really intense if you don't have any of the outside distractions. Good thought. It's time to try.
Okay.
Shall return in a moment.
Okay, just before we do the technique one, just to acknowledge a bit of tidying up, a bit of housekeeping, as it were. Terry queried last night whether there had been a transposition in the tones that were given for the elements to do with identifying your Christic and Rishik capstone notes. And what she was referring to was having seen the earlier stage of this same element, in which we'd simply identified the tones that utilized out of the primal light fields. Okay, and in that point she was correct in that two of them had been transposed. It's probably appropriate to point out also that in the supplement, the 2-page supplement you're given, we've been asked to include the appropriate tone from the primal sound field as well, which is where you get Kundare coming into play with Kirashe, and they relate on an inverse basis. So, as you will see, you have Ku and Sha associated together. You're not taking the two highest tones. In fact, the highest tone of the Kirashe works with the lower end of the Kundare. And whilst we were doing that, we were also encouraged to identify the Christos tone that goes with each of the two. So now there are 3 tones as a result of Terry's query, which is a good result, really. The sheets will be reprinted today, and you'll be given new sheets just to replace the old ones, so there's no confusion. Okay. Anyway, thank you again, Terry, for spotting that. Okie dokie. All right, technique 1, the Akasha Quick Seal activation. The purpose of the Akasha Quick Seal activation is a progression from Maharic Seal techniques through which the accumulating benefits and properties of working with the Maharic Seal are strengthened, amplified, and developed further. Regular use of general Maharic Seal techniques fulfills the following aspects of biospiritual development. The list will be read in a moment. Consistent use of the Akasha Quick Seal technique strengthens, amplifies, expedites, and reinforces all of these Maharic Seal aspects as it generates access to frequencies of the Kirashe, primal light, and sound field currents of dimensions 13, 14, and 15, which should include Kirashe and Kundare, which is where the primal light and sound field currents exist, via activation of the Akasha Echo Code mathematical program. The Akasha Quick Seal technique is also used to create and strengthen a dedicated line of frequency for development of clear communication between the D12 personal divine blueprint Christos avatar identity, the density 5 personal Rishi identity, and the 3D self. The Akasha-sealed dedicated line provides intensified protection and amplified bioenergetic field strength in terms of multidimensional contact, shadow healing, and Akasha Merkaba activation technologies. The Akasha Quick Seal activation technique is also used as a preliminary and prerequisite technique prior to more advanced technologies of shadow healing, Amaraya flame activation, and contact. Biospiritual development generated through Maharic Seal and amplified by Akasha Quick Seal techniques. It begins the process of activating the 8th through the 12th chakras, Kathara centers, and DNA strand templates of the personal anatomy to initiate and expedite personal soul, oversoul, and Christos avatar identity integration. The technique assists the opening of natural crystal seals in the body that regulate DNA template activation, consciousness expansion, and spiritual identity integration to expedite the natural process of conscious evolution. The technique also opens the natural planetary biofeed interface system within the personal body, enabling the body vehicle to become a truly effective tool for lasting, Christic divine blueprint planetary grid and sacred site work. It triggers DNA template activations that progressively and automatically initiate sequential activation of the full Akasha Christos Merkaba vehicle phases. Enables spiritual energy healers to transmit 12D frequency subharmonics, providing more powerful, longer lasting, and often permanent healing facilitation, while transmuting and clearing personal and client bioenergetic field distortions. The seals protect users from disharmonic energies associated with channeling, energy healing, astral projection, and buffers most types of detrimental bioenergetic field infiltration, attachment, and implantation, such as psychotronics, astral implants, possession, etc. And I stress at this point that this remark is being made with consistent and accumulated development of the frequency held in the shield. You can't do this for a month and expect to be impregnable to a D11.5 avatar, just to make that clear. It amplifies the results of spiritually focused activities, meditation, prayer, yoga, and so on, harmonizes personal and environmental energies, creates morphogenetic repatterning, clearing karmic miasmic imprints which otherwise block DNA activation, and expedites attainment of true consciousness expansion and full embodiment of the personal and universal Christos principle. Realigns, revitalizes, and regenerates all aspects of the physical and subtle body systems. Triggers activation of 11th and 12th strand subharmonics in every DNA strand, which assists correction of DNA template code reversals and the effect, where possible, and the effects of interaction with other code reverse partners, which is relating to or hinting at the use of the Maharic Seal before undertaking intimate relationships with anybody, however long they've known them. And if you don't, you may suffer consequences of code reversal, that's what it's saying. Prepares and equips practitioners to receive and hold the increasing flow of higher frequency energies flowing into the planetary grids and personal morphogenetic fields arising from the intensifying stellar activation cycle now underway and through 2017. I've been asked to read this, so I will. You may use Technique 1, the Akasha Quick Seal activation, to begin using the shadow healing Amaraya flame and contact techniques contained in this Dance for Love supplement. However, if you have not yet worked with the Maharic Seal and Vecca Code induction technologies of the Dance for Life program, preliminary use of the following 3 preparatory steps is strongly recommended before initiating use of the Akasha Quick Seal activation technique. And we can't do that way this morning. Use of the Akasha Quick Seal activation preparatory steps will facilitate building of sufficient critical mass frequency during use of the Akasha Quick Seal technique. Those who have worked with the Maharic Seal and Vecca Code induction techniques need only to follow preparatory step 3. Now, to simplify what that's about, how many people have not utilized the Akasha and Ruche symbols in what's known as the Maharic Seal technique? 1 or 2, 3? Okay, I would suggest if you just refer to what we call the teardrop shape, which is the outline of the Akasha on the cover of your manual. So there's no point in asking you to incorporate the Ruche because you won't be able to hold the frequency anyway if you haven't already spent time making the progression from the Hierophant 6.12.24 star thing. So for people who haven't worked with the full Akasha technique, then if you can intend or visualize what we call the teardrop, and inside of the teardrop
you will be seeing whatever you can manage to see or otherwise intend there to be a 12 or a 24-point star. Okay, 24-point star is preferable, 12 or 24 will work. So when I refer to the Hierophant, people who are working still with stars are seeing a star inside of the teardrop, and people who are accustomed to working with the ruche at the center of the Akasha just do as you would normally do. All right? So with that in mind, we'll begin. Now, the people who have not yet used the Akasha activation may hear may not be familiar with the tone, the Akasha Son tone, which is the ancient Anahazi language. And there is a tone that is used, and I will repeat it initially 2 or 3 times so that those people not familiar with hearing it can hear it from me through the mic and everybody else in the room who does know it. All right? So just as usual, to get yourself comfortable, have a wriggle in your seat and begin to bring your attention to your breathing rhythm. And the general intention at this point is to reduce your breathing rate, if you can, to something like 50% of what you call normal. Just take a few seconds just trying to regulate and slow your breathing rate. And whilst you're concentrating on doing that with your breathing rate, imagine or visualize the Akasha Hierophant at the center of your brain, the pineal gland. And it is appropriate for everyone to visualize the Hierophant surrounded by a pale blue sphere of light. This pale blue sphere containing the Akasha Hierophant is called the Akasha sphere, and it serves as a buffer for your body's readiness to accept the frequencies associated with the Akasha code. The sphere holds the energy for you until your body can handle and assimilate the energy. Your body, DNA template and shields will automatically draw the appropriate amount of Akasha code frequency from the blue sphere as needed. So begin by toning the Akasha Son 3 times. Uma e tre ina e Akasha. Uma e tre ina e Akasha. Uma e tre ina e Akasha. Now inhale, using the breath to energetically grab the pale blue Akasha sphere located at the pineal gland, and on the exhale, use the breath to push the sphere all the way down to Earth's core. And again, tone the Akasha Son 3 times. Before the next inhale, repeat the Akasha Son 3 times more. Use the inhale to draw the Akasha sphere up to your personal Maharic shield 12 inches below your feet. And exhale, watching the Akasha sphere become a pale silver blue sphere that expands outward to form a large sphere. Whilst toning the Akasha Son 3 times, imagine that your Maharic shield pops out as a pale silver disc about 4 feet in diameter, surrounded by a coating or aura of pale blue light, with the Akasha Hierophant at its center. So tone the Akasha Son 3 times, and imagine your Maharic shield popping out as a pale silver disc about 4 feet in diameter, surrounded by a coating of pale blue light, with the Akasha Hierophant symbol at the center. Bring your attention to the center of your Maharic shield 12 inches below your feet, and tone the Akasha Son 3 times.
Uma e tre ina
Now inhale, using the breath to draw the Akasha Hierophant symbol without the pale blue sphere from the Maharak shield center up into the heart chakra. Just hold briefly and then exhale, using the breath to expand the frequencies of the Akasha code from the Hierophant into the heart chakra. And then softly tone the Akasha song 3 times.